Yo, what's up? Now, today we are going to be talking about this particular pair right here, which is the CCZ Harmony. Now, this pair retails for 27 US dollars, but KEEPHIFI sent me this. So first of all, thank you KEEPHIFI, and second of all, they've also given me a good discount code. So for anybody who wants this, it will be an additional 40% off if you use my code DexterAudio at checkout. Just want to make this very clear. The code is only made in the context where I am making this video so that you guys can get a better deal if you watch my videos and know about this thing. I'm not being paid. I'm not being incentivized to say anything good or bad about this. So all thoughts and opinions are of my own. But definitely, I really appreciate KEEPHIFI for doing a discount code for every single viewer of mine. So with that being said, let's actually talk about this particular IEM. Now, the CCZ Harmony is a 1DD 1BA setup. And as you can see, the build is as basic as it gets for this price point, which is made with plastic and some very nice metal accents. Me personally, I don't find these to be any issue because, you know, even though you're talking about, oh, the feel is quite cheap or whatnot, for some people, they really don't like plastic. For me, for this price, I can't really fault them for using plastic. And to be honest, this is quite a dense plastic. I feel like it's quite hefty rather than, you know, some other IEMs that feel damn cheap. This thing still feels quite quality. And two things that I particularly like about CCZ are these. First of all, it has a metal nozzle, so you know, even though for this price point they are not skimping in any way. And second of all, I feel like this is probably the only brand that's doing this. They have this rubberized wing right here in the anatomy of the shell, which I personally quite appreciate. So when you're wearing this, you'll definitely get a little bit more grip outside of ear. Considering the fact that I have very dry ears, this thing definitely helps a lot. And I've used this currently for around 2 hours and there's not really that much fatigue. And also one more thing that I want to point out is the stock earbuds. Now, for what they provide you with, all I could say is that this thing is marginally better than the KZs, mainly because it is not as hard as the KZ Starlines. This thing feels softer. Now, sound quality of this IEM personally, I think from now on, everybody who has watched my videos definitely know I burn in my IEMs. On first impressions, this thing really isn't that good. It's subpar, but definitely diaphragms need some time of breaking in. So I burned this in for 12 hours using my Hibi DAC. And after that, everything loosened up a little bit more so that it could sound a little bit better. So again, in the context of my video, I only burned this in for 12 hours. There might be even more significant difference if I make it to 20 to 50, maybe even 100, but you get what I mean. Testing of this IEM will solely be done using the Hibi R63 2025 because the synergy of this particular pair with my Mac just doesn't work for some weird reason. First impressions of this IEM is extremely straight to the point. It is your standard V-shaped IEM, but personally I feel like this thing is more focused on bass and it has quite a level of treble roll-off. So expect this thing to have V-shaped qualities but with more bass and a more relaxed treble. And as always, starting off with the bass, definitely this thing is heavier on the low end. It definitely feels heavy, it feels simple, but for the price, it definitely does its job. And personally, I feel like this definitely covers a specific demographic that we'll get to later on. Sub-bass overall feels quite airy and rumbly, and I feel like that thing really speaks a lot for people who are trying to go into the audiophile community. This thing will definitely surprise you, but for people who listened a little bit more, they might feel like the lower frequency might sound a little bit too ambiguous because this thing kind of bleeds over to the lows and the mid bass. Which, speaking of the lower bass and the mid bass, overall I feel like it's quite okay, but occasionally there might be some levels of bloatiness if the track gets busy. And in terms of the speed, everything in my opinion sounds quite good. It sounds like an organic level of speed. It doesn't sound too fast nor too slow. It sounds quite natural. And prior to burn-in, I first listened to this, it has a heaps amount of bass bleed, but after 12 hours so far, the bass bleed is still there, but already being minimized by a very significant degree. Now going on to the vocals, definitely V-shaped, so you are expecting a level of recessed. This thing overall, despite it being male or female vocals, will definitely be on the thinner side, but overall still gives you quite a good amount of energy as well as clarity. And again, due to the fact of the price point, expect this thing to have some very slight incoherencies when very busy tracks come in. Examples that I used are the closer to the ending part of Kodeka's Godstain, Stellar Stella, Sunji Junihun. All of these few tracks are quite busy, and they definitely try to push this thing to its limits, and it definitely has faltered a little bit. But for 90% of people who are listening to their songs, I doubt your songs are going to be extremely busy. And also, there's not going to be any levels of sibilance because, like I said, there's going to be some treble roll off. It also applies to the mid range as well. So, no sibilance, quite a good thing. And going on to the mids, overall, I would say that this thing sounds quite playful. It sounds quite fun in the dynamics part. But for some reason, I feel like there's a very clear cut where the technical prowess kind of dips a little bit, and it doesn't dip. Anything that has a lower octave, more towards, I would say, pianos and also bass lines, or I would say guitars that are playing bass lines, those might sound a little bit muddy. But for other things like strings, brass, digital synths that are on the higher end, they will definitely sound better in terms of clarity as well as presentation. It's quite a little bit of a hit or miss if you are focusing that specific, but overall I would say it's still quite good. Moving on to the upper mids and treble, like I said, even though this is a V shape, there is treble roll off, so expect the treble to not be as energetic, but it will be smoothened out, so you'll be given a more relaxed experience. So expect yourself to be able to use this without fatigue. Percussion, cymbals, hats, rides, all of those sound quite good, but occasionally you might feel there's some very slight unnaturalness to it. Maybe it's something along the lines of some slight metallic twang. I can't really pinpoint it because it's been a while since I've heard of something like that, but there's definitely something going on that just keeps me a little bit more engaged, but not in a slightly good way. But anyways, what is quite engaging still is guitar shreds and pianos. All of those on the high end are quite good, and for some people they might associate it to be muddy. I personally just call it to be less resolving, more roll off, more smoothing out. But yeah, definitely there's one thing that I just remembered that I want to say is for certain songs in the mix that has very strong levels of sub bass, occasionally it might skip the mids and just go for the highs, because highs are more relaxed, so they could be a little bit drowned out by sub bass. Now moving on to the technicalities, this thing overall has quite decent dynamics, but again, expect some levels of incoherency when tracks get too extremely busy. Staging, in my opinion, I feel like it's the weakest link of this IEM. Even for this price, I feel like the ZVX, the KZ ZVX is still a better performing IEM in this category alone. This thing is quite narrow, but then again, some people don't really notice staging that much. So if that doesn't apply to you, then it's okay. Because nevertheless, even though staging is narrow, this thing still has a good amount of imaging and separation for the price point. Detail retrieval, in my opinion, since this thing is more focused to be a musical pair and more bassy set, I would say it's more focused on macro details, and occasionally micro details might be, what's the word for it? It might be a little bit more taken out of context where it sounds weirdly more macro than usual. So with all that being said, the thing that I want to say in the beginning is the fact that, this pair specifically is more focused to be a bassy set. I personally can find this to be quite useful, even for my current context right now, to be used as a workout IEM. Mainly because when I'm working out, I definitely want to use an IEM. And the issue with me right now is that I currently use my Neko cakes, and it's been about a year plus. Occasionally one side might actually lose sound, this and that, you get what I mean. Prior to using a TWS, I used a KZ EDX, and that thing is quite good. Even though everything sounds extremely simple, that's what I want when I'm working out. When I am hitting the gym, when I'm hitting all of my PRs, I don't want too much stuff. I just want a very simple IEM that just hits every single thing. So with that being said, this thing is quite on the bassy side, but I personally can find a very good use for this, which is going to be going into my gym bag after this video ends. But regardless of what I said just now, I did test this on a few genres of music, and musics that actually work is, in my opinion, anything that does not have vocals, unless you don't really focus more on vocals like me. If you still want to focus on vocals, I would say anything along the lines of jazz, anything along the lines of soul, slow R&B, all of those will definitely work. Hip hop will definitely still work as well. Only a few things that I feel like doesn't work would be something along the lines of like heavy metal, hard rock, very fast rock, stuff like those will probably not fly for this IEM. So if you feel like you fit the demographic of what I just said, then this pair is a very good try for adding into your collection. So again, with that being said, thank you to KEEPHIFI for sending these pair my way. And again, the code is right here. Just use it for an extra 40% off. Thank you, KEEPHIFI. Thank you to you guys for watching my video. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.